What I mean is that it's exactly what AJ was saying. It's, here's an example. And I know the team listens to Topline. More of the team listens to Topline now than ever before, which I love. So,
by the way, did they hear from like other people? Like, hey, this is pretty good. Like, that's what my team did.
I don't know. Is that true?
Yeah, that's like Hector on my sales team was with a friend at a FCS game, a soccer match here in Austin, and his friend's like, "Hey, have you been listening to Topline?" And Hector's like, "What are you talking about?" He's like, "It's pretty good." And Hector's like, "What? My CEO? Get out of here!"
My colleagues, they feel it when they go on a call and a client is saying that. They're like, "Oh, I'm a Topline fan." They're like, "People listen to this." Okay.
Welcome to Topline, the podcast for the best founders, operators, and investors in B2B tech. Every week, AJ Bruno, Asad Zaman, and me, Sam Jacobs, will break down what's important for you to know to be the most well-informed professionals in the market. What do the revenue leaders at Google, 3M, IBM, Shopify, Square, and Cisco have in common? Their teams all use SalesLoft to hit their number. SalesLoft is the only platform that's designed for the way revenue teams work every day, so sellers can prioritize and take the right actions to get more deals done. From prospecting and deal management to coaching and forecasting. No more guesswork, no more wasted time on non-selling activities. Follow SalesLoft on LinkedIn to learn more. Hello. It's Topline. Is it 53?
53.
53 Toplines.
This is the first week of the new year, basically, for us.
So we did, and if you are listening, it's Sam, AJ, and Asad. And if you're listening, this all started from SVB's collapse, right? If I'm not mistaken.
This did.
Yeah.
I think this was very much, you called us on a Saturday and said like, hey, Sunday. Okay. Oh, jeez. It was March 15th at 2:35 p.m.
It was the afternoon.
Sam called us and I was like, yeah. I always say, here's the thing. Whenever you have like a good friend that's like in network and they ask you to do something, you just say yes. Just say like, hey, can you do this thing?
That's a good policy.
Yeah. You just say yes and you just do it. And so we did it. And got on, and I remember calling Asad right away, and I was like, Asad, that was really good. Like that was we have really good kinetic energy.
We have some good chemistry. Yeah.
We had all the things.
I think we were able to disagree and have fun doing it, and I think that's probably one of the foundations for something like this to sustain is like you have to be able to disagree on things. You have to have differing opinions. So I remember specifically, it was you guys, AJ and I disagreed on how much of a mistake SVB had made. Like I was saying, them not having a chief risk officer was a big problem, and AJ was like, "But this wasn't them being sketchy." And so we had a debate, and then that made it a lot of fun.
Yeah, but who was right in that argument? Probably you.
Of course, I was.
You were
right.
probably right.
100%.
Well, I mean, SVB doesn't really. I mean, they exist. Actually, I'm meeting with them next week.
But in hindsight, it was 100%. I was right. Yeah.
Okay.
we still bank with SVB.
Yeah, look at this.
It's funny. We got this debt facility, whatever it was, right before the crisis, and it was a line of credit and it was a term loan, and both of them had these conditions that you had to draw them down before X period or they would expire, and so we bank, but you have to move all your money over there. So even when they went to First Citizens, we had to move all of our money over to SVB after they were stabilized. So we did all of that, but then we never drew down any of the debt facilities. So now that expired. So now they're just our bank. But we have no access. I think we'd have to be underwritten for a new facility. Thank God we're cash flow positive.
It's really hard to like pull a facility in a tough market, like where you probably need it the most, but there's so much anxiety because there's like a ticking time bomb that starts when you pull that facility or when you leverage it.
Yeah, it doesn't. I think the whole concept a line of credit for like working capital management, that makes sense to me. But the idea that your company isn't doing well, so you're going to use debt as a lifeline doesn't make any sense because, as we've talked about, all you're going to do is, if you don't fix the structural problems and you're still burning capital, then all you're doing is giving the company to the bank instead of to your investors or to bankruptcy.
Yeah.
So it really was never really an option to draw down. I mean, we thought about it. I thought about it once in a while, but really it was like, let's fix the business, which thank God we did.
Yeah,
it's such a high risk move.
There's a customer of ours that's doing 300 million in cash flow positive. We've even talked about this in EBITDA, but they have a like $250 million loan that they're repaying back, and they pay off like 100 million of it a year goes to interest only or something ridiculous. It was more orders of magnitude larger. It's like a $2 billion loan. Yeah. So like, you have to restructure that. I don't know how you get out of that. That seems like a messy time. Have either of you listened to any of our early episodes? Like gone back and listened?
Yeah, no, I haven't.
I have.
How do we sound?
Yeah.
Awesome.
There was a point in which I was doing an analysis, just like I was trying to see how it's evolved. And so I went back and listened to the first few. It's hilarious. It's amazing to see.
We should do that. Throwback Thursday.
Remember, like initially we didn't have docket. So we were like,
we're just winging it.
All right. We would just start recording and just be like, what do you want to talk about today?
Where does this go? And so it was amazing. But they were all like good.
It's exactly
I think what happens is you become more comfortable.
Pointless.
There was a little bit of
today's episode is Throwback Thursday for you all.
Why don't we get started, Asad?
Okay, so
I was just like, are people really enjoying listening to this?
Yeah, we got
not.
feedback for a while that small talk was not in, and then we were like, we don't care, we're doing it anyway. So we're back.
Well, I think because we got feedback from both sides, we're like, let's pick one side then. Yeah. Okay. So we're going to talk a little bit about Gong's State of Revenue Leadership report. It just came out. And their data aligns with a lot of the Pavilion data, the Epster Pavilion benchmarking report, as well as the Pulse surveys. So a few of the data points are 81% of revenue leaders indicated that their deals were more complex in 2023. No surprise. 54% mentioned increased competition. 57% mentioned negative impact of the macro environment on their deals. And as a result, 70% of revenue leaders said, we rolled out new go-to-market messaging, but still 57% missed their revenue targets. What stood out was that 73% missed their customer renewal targets. And the reason it stood out is you get a lot of NRR data. You don't get a lot of specific renewal data. So it was just interesting because it was out of all the data we looked at the first time I saw that. Now, we've been hearing, we've been hearing that many people hope that the market improves and then retention will improve. But we also understand that there's this push towards consolidation in tech stats that's happening. On the go-to-market front, this report had some data on that. So reps are using 7 tools on average. They cite switching between multiple systems to complete their selling activities as their number one challenge/annoyance. And when you think about the tech stack consolidation, do you think, Sam, that as the market improves, the improvement will help renewal numbers significantly, or is the consolidation going to maintain the pressure on renewal achievements, and we're going to see 2024 look strangely similar to 2023?
I think 2024 will look frustratingly similar to 2023.
That's a better word for it.
Well, I don't think the market, the market can mean a lot of things, right? The market can mean buyers, technology buyers, and leaders at large companies or any kind of company that are buying technology. It could mean the equities market. It could mean the overall financial markets. It could mean the global economy. When we look at the overall financial markets, unfortunately for all of us that are in the market, I think that it feels like there's going to be more frustration because inflation is still coming in hot. And even today, Jerome Powell said that he's not even sure there will be any rate cuts in 2024.
He said that today?
He said that today.
Oh my.
And, there's other people, Larry Summers, saying there's a 25% chance that rates will go up from here. to further cool down the economy. And what does that mean for the rest of us that are downstream of all these decisions? It means that I think 2025 and 2026, probably coinciding with maybe a Trump presidency, will be good. But I think 2024 is going to be a little bit frustrating for people. I think there's no big rebound. I think execution is still paramount. And what does that mean for renewal rates? We have to remember one thing, though, on the caveat side. The sense of optimism. What would be the sense of optimism? The sense of optimism would be that we're comping renewals now from sales that were made last year, right? It's not, the renewal rate is a function of the cohort. And if the cohort bought in adverse economic conditions already last year, I would imagine that this cohort of renewals is going to perform better than last year. Last year, through the summer and the fall, you were comping 2022 sales where there was a lot more enthusiasm and optimism before the reality of the tech recession, came upon us. And the consequence of that was that I bet renewal numbers are worse in 2023 than this year, where if you made the sale last year, particularly in the fall of last year, I feel like you're probably well positioned to renew it. At least you're better positioned to renew it than you would have been a year ago. I think the spring of 24 comping 23 might still be some overhang if you're selling into tech, because we're still seeing companies that, laid off their sales teams, got way smaller, dramatically contracted the size of their go-to-market investment. But I think through the fall, I think renewal rates should improve.
Sam, can you explain for the audience what comping means here?
Sure. Comping means, it really for me I became aware of sort of the terminology when I was covering retail stores, and you'd have same store sales and you were always tracking the previous 12 months. So you would compare. Comp means compare. So comparing the 12 months prior to the current period and figuring out, what was happening from there. So that's what it means. It just means looking back on the same batch of data that you were looking at a year ago and figuring out what the comparable is.
I think that's, as you were speaking, it makes a lot of sense. AJ, how does that land with you?
I want to shout out really quickly our Slack channel, because you had dropped this in the Slack channel, kind of like the report itself. But then Kyle Norton actually had the report, and that's where I actually read it from, was because he dropped the link into it, and I didn't see it anywhere else. So I appreciate that. Shout out to Kyle. Which the other thing that Kyle said, which I think is very true, and just talking about the report and more generally, is optimism is the madness of insisting that all is well when we are miserable. Voltaire. That's in reference to at 57%, more than half of organizations miss their gross revenue goals, and painful 73% miss their existing customer renewal targets for 2023, like you said, Asad. 68% of leaders believe the revenue performance will improve in 2024. We all got a lot of hopium. I think to Sam's point of we had a lot of decisions that were made last year in this market that will be helpful for us. The thing that I took from that Gong report was the complex buyer, and that's what I feel. When we talked about this last week, where I feel there's a more complex buyer that is putting downward pressure on startups, and that will make renewal rates more challenging, I think, for companies that are moving either up market or have moved into a different industry, and their onboardings might have gotten off to a false start. So it'll be really interesting to track those onboardings of new customers, either in new industries or new ICP, ideal customer profile, with these companies. I also would say that that's true because if you look at and we can see the data on this in terms of growth teams growing again. Well, when growth teams grow, what tends to happen? You tend to create roles for different markets. So you were operating mid-market, you're building an SMB team, transactional team. You were operating in the enterprise, let's go build a mid-market team. And I think,
and even just verticals, you might stay mid-market, but now you're going after more verticals.
Right.
And so you have specialists for those.
You're specialists, yeah. So that's we're kind of reversing back to a growth a little bit, at least from the data I'm seeing in terms of who are customers adding to their teams. And it will be interesting to see how they ramp up and onboard and understand their own products in general as well, so that there's an overselling that potentially happens as you ramp. And I think that might show up in the data at this time next year too.
A lot of our ecosystem believes that the right approach to go to market is you're not creating demand, you're capturing demand, right? I wonder if in this new world that we find ourselves in, for a company to thrive, you actually have to be able to create demand as well, which is a muscle. Like, it's a different muscle. It's a different set of skills. If you're a company that's doing something for the first time that it's ever been done, you're not selling against pre-existing budget. You're selling against status quo. You have to know how to create demand in that instance. And so one is definitely...
Awesome. Let me ask a question. So I wasn't aware that we think that. So explain on that idea more. You think people don't think they need to generate demand? They think that demand already exists for their category and they just need to capture it?
Yes. There was a post by Dave Kellogg on this point, I think last night as well, which is that you're better off trying to capture the existing demand that's in the market than you are trying to create demand. That assumes that you're in a competitive category and there is existing demand. Like, it assumes so many things that I think played out for 7, 8, 10 years, right? When interest rates were very low from 2009 to 2022, you might have found a lot of companies that got to 50 or 100 million in revenue by doing exactly that. But if you look back the previous decades and you think forward, I think companies will have to realize that for them to be able to get to that type of scale and just to thrive, you need to know how to create demand. And that is a different skill set, meaning that there are a lot of demand gen people and just salespeople as well and leaders that really only know how to capture it. They don't know how to sell against status quo. They know how to win if there's pre-existing budget for something. And it's a very different skill set.
I mean, I certainly think, based on our conversation from last week, that the enterprise is not in a position of just having latent demand for some of these new tools.
Exactly.
I would imagine that within the enterprise, you have to, as you say, create demand. I mean, I work in a category that is so amorphous and strange that I've always assumed I needed to create demand. Because I don't think people get out of bed every day saying, I need to join a community of like-minded peers, unless they're aware that it exists and unless they're aware that it can help them solve their problems. So I've never really been, at least not running Pavilion, in a place where there was but I love that. I guess that's what an RFP is, right? An RFP, the whole concept of it is like there's existing demand and it's our opportunity to position ourselves against competitors versus having to create it from whole cloth.
I mean,
it's one of the major reasons why, you know how they say somebody from a very large company struggles at a startup, and we assume that the struggle is because of infrastructure. Like, you have more support when you're in a bigger company than in a smaller company. But the job to be done is also fundamentally different. If you're selling a CRM, you know there's budget, and you're trying to tell them why our CRM is better than the other CRM, right? But that's why it's really hard for that person to go to a seed round or Series A company and be like, well, now this client has no budget. We need to knock on their door and get them to understand why they should create budget, that too in this environment, and why they should prioritize this today. It's such a different skill set. It's not one is better than the other. It's just a different skill set. So transitioning from big company to small company and having to deal with a different type of organization, and then this difference in how you go to market leads to a really high failure rate for go-to-market leaders from big companies.
I think I completely agree with you. And it's just like the joke of the business card. Like, when your business card doesn't say Salesforce on it, all the doors don't open automatically. I've talked to a lot of founders that struggle with this too, where they're frustrated about all of the work they have to do to explain what their product does, why it's valuable, what the ROI is. They assume, because they're really interested in this thing, that if they just get into enough conversations, people will just buy it without having to go through the entire process of explaining, like, why is it valuable? How is this going to transform your business? And doing the product marketing of it. I had a conversation like that today, which was really interesting. So, to your point,
I've always been on the opposite side of this. The interest for QuotaPath, the demand's always been there. Like the commissions are there. People need to buy. There's people looking for commissions. We've captured some of that market for the specific. But to your point, Sam, when I would like go, people get the problem and the idea. The biggest issue I always had was like, can you do this? Can it do this? Can it do this? Can it do this? And then it becomes this frustrating game of like, yeah, like we're 6 months into this. Here we are 6 years in, and 6 years in, you're still feeling like you're like really building to that customer in a way that's like, because it's so nuanced and specific. And so
when you say building to the customer, AJ, you mean instead of them understanding these are the features of this product category, stop asking me for different ones. It's, well, can it do this, this, and that? And you're still in a position of saying, well, maybe, how big can the deal be?
Well, and I don't, we've stopped. I mean, we've never really had king customers. I think there's a few exceptions that we potentially might explore if we move up market.
You did an integration for us, didn't you?
Yeah,
I found that very sweet.
That job adder, right? That was job adder. But we now have 15 other customers that use job adder.
You're welcome.
LeafLink. LeafLink is the marijuana CRM. We did it for a specific customer, and we now have 25 other customers that use LeafLink. So it's like something you just kind of you figure out what that demand is and capturing it. We're doing that with payroll integrations right now too. So. Sam, your business is your business is much harder for that very reason, because it's like, what did you say last week that was the really good analogy to like, do you do this? No, we don't do this. There was like a really good analogy that you used last week.
I agree that it was a great
analogy. That one time you said something so smart.
I think I say like 12 brilliant things.
I'm not even giving you credit. It was someone that you were talking to that was like, hey, your business is like this. You should be doing it like, oh, yeah. Do you do
the founder thing?
Omakase.
Yeah, that's the word of the quarter at Pavilion, omakase. Well, I by the way, I don't think that's just true for our business. I think in general, like the great myth of sales is that the buyers know what they want.
Yeah.
And I think all of us need to be far more prescriptive. And it's the trap of discovery, where if you're, an inexperienced seller, you get trapped in these conversations where you keep asking questions, hoping that they'll tell you the answer, to the test. Like, here's how we buy. And most of the time, they don't even know how to buy software. They wouldn't know how to implement it. You have to tell them. You're the one that sells this kind of software all the time. You're the one that has all the customers. You're the one that knows how they're supposed to do it. And I think for too many of us, I will say that the posture, certainly of Pavilion, over, the work that I'm trying to do with my team is moving from a defensive posture to an offensive posture. And I don't mean to be offensive, of course, or to be antagonistic, but I do mean to be confident.
We're just going to say the most politically incorrect things ever as an organization. That's our new approach to this.
I don't mean that. What I mean is that it's exactly what AJ was saying. It's, here's an example. And I know the team listens to Topline. More of the team listens to Topline now than ever before, which I love. So,
by the way, did they hear from like other people? Like, hey, this is pretty good. Like, that's what my team did.
I don't know. Is that true?
Yeah, that's like Hector on my sales team was with a friend at a FCS game, a soccer match here in Austin, and his friend's like, "Hey, have you been listening to Topline?" And Hector's like, "What are you talking about?" He's like, "It's pretty good." And Hector's like, "What? My CEO? Get out of here!"
My colleagues, they feel it when they go on a call and a client is saying that. They're like, "Oh, I'm a Topline fan." They're like, "People listen to this." Okay.
Calling all CROs and sales executives, join us on June 6th in Boston for Pavilion CRO Summit. Unlock new perspectives and tactics that can help you take a new approach to growth, understand your unit economics, and align with key stakeholders to elevate your business and your career. Register now at joinpavilion.com/CRO Summit. Use the code TOPLINE to receive 20% off your ticket. Sam,
what was
I digress. You're talking. Yes. You said I made a great point. That was your last words.
You're going to be on the offense, not the defense.
Yes, offense.
Yes, and I think there's a lot of organizations. In a year like 2023, when you get beat up a lot, you fall back on your heels, and there becomes the tone of your conversation with your customers can become apologetic, and it can also become
Yep.
diffuse. And what I mean by diffuse is you don't have the confidence to say this is the right way to do it. So you end up trying to cater to every different persona. And we have this idea that, people join Pavilion for all kinds of different reasons, and we need a different journey for each one of those reasons. And, my thought for today, for this quarter at least, for Omakase is, no, you don't. What if you don't? What if, some people join to find a job, and some people join to network with peers, and some people join to learn something? Great. I don't care. You're going to do this. You're going to do it this way because this is the way that it works. It's like, well, I'm running a marathon because I want to get in shape, and I'm running a marathon for charity, and I don't give a shit. Right.
Yeah.
There's a way that you train for a marathon, and you're going to train that way. And if you don't want to train that way, then you're not going to be able to run the marathon. And I don't think that's just us. I think a lot of organizations, because of exactly what you said, Asad, about the retention rates, the renewal rates, there's a lot of people that are questioning themselves. And the job and the work is to remind yourself, particularly for the three of us, because we help a lot of people and we serve a lot of people. And there's a lot of really happy customers of Pavilion, of QuotaPath, of Sales Talent Agency. And we have to remember that. And we have to remember that we know how to do the category that we're in better than our customers. And so they might have, the joke internally for us is like, I don't really use Slack. I don't like Slack. It's like, okay, well then you probably shouldn't join Pavilion because it's a pretty big part of how we interact with each other. I don't really like going to in-person events. Then this isn't going to be the right place for you, unfortunately, because, I live in Oslo, and I don't want to go to CMO Summit because that's in New York City. It's like, well, you should go to CMO Summit in New York City. You should get on a plane and you should go, because that's where Pavilion comes to life. You should meet all these people in person. We're going to have, Matt Hines there, and we're going to have Latney Conant there. We're going to have Andrea Kale there. We're going to have Kathleen Booth there. So get your ass on a plane and fly to New York.
The sensors are out.
That's the answer to your question.
The sensors are out in full force today. We're just.
I'm not going to say
an avalanche. You say one, and then it's so much fun.
Sam, you did say something there also pretty smart. I'll throw the compliment back to you.
Thank you.
But the buyer, teaching the buyers what they want. This goes to Austin. You shared that LinkedIn post that we saw and got a lot of traction the other day. We won't name names on that, or I won't name names.
We won't? I can frame. Yeah, I can frame it. Like, you want me to frame it?
Frame it.
So I was sent this by
Casoglow's post.
Yeah. Mark's post. So I was sent this by one of our Slack channel members, a dear friend of mine. I won't name him because I'm going to say pointed things. But basically, the post is about a recent buying experience that Mark had. For those who don't know Mark, he was the SVP of sales at Outreach and then the CRO at Catalyst for a short period of time. And he basically made a post about a frustrating buying experience where he called this company and he said, I have budget. I know my problem. I just have a couple of questions. Answer them for me. And we can do this really quickly. And then the AE on the other side, in the story at least, was not very skilled, did not sound like an elite AE. But if you separate yourself from exactly how they were saying something, it's what they were doing that I think is interesting, which is they were asking questions. And that really annoyed Mark. And so he wrote this post, and it's okay. People get annoyed. I found the comments fascinating. Like, this post went viral, and almost a big chunk of our community, like thought leaders, etc., they were all in there. And they were talking about how this company should just take the sale. What are you doing? Take the sale. Meet the buyer where the buyer is. You just take the sale. And it sounded like a bunch of sales leaders, not go-to-market professionals. I think the differentiation between sales and go-to-market is sales. When it was siloed, the problem was salespeople brought in deals by selling dreams and doing the wrong things that were churned. It's why we decided to have one person on top of it all who's accountable for NRR and understands that I need to qualify things. I need to bring in the right quality customers. I need to manage expectations because otherwise it churns. So I was just really surprised at the community and even his stance. He's a CRO and he was talking like a sales leader. And so am I right? Am I wrong? AJ, like, do you think that they should just take the sale when the sale's available? Or do you think we have to ask questions?
First off, this AE is just doing their job. So, like, let's give the person that's doing it a little bit of grace. I know he didn't name names. He named himself there. But, like, it felt like it was more of an attack on the person than it was the company or the process. Secondly, and I think that I said this, and there was a comment you said, is like, at the end of the day, what we're talking about is you want to find really good customers. You want to find customers that you're solving the right problem. You might have a problem and think you know the solution, but if it doesn't 100% fit, then maybe it isn't a good fit. He was disqualifying. Was the person, and I say he, I think it was the sales rep. Was he going about it in a way that was like in the, the best, most engaging relationship? It doesn't sound like it. I think I probably would have said like, look, fine. You clearly have an agenda coming into this conversation. You want to be heard. Fine. Let's hear it. Tell me all the things that you need to make sure, and just all of the things so you can feel like you're heard. And that is the point that I think was I think that you're right. Go to market versus sales leaders. Really great sales leaders listen. And I'm surprised to hear like that he's taking this to LinkedIn publicly when it didn't feel like there was a lot of listening going on in that call. But I don't know.
Community just jumped on this bandwagon. Like I was actually disappointed at the hundreds of comments from thought leaders and elite leaders. It made me really. I used to wonder why we had churn as such a big problem in the ecosystem. After reading the comments, I was like, yeah, like we're supposed to have a churn problem in this ecosystem. We're like at the early days of becoming a go-to-market community. We were a sales versus that community for decades. It's going to take a lot longer to break out of those bad habits and tendencies, and this really stood out to me as
it could have been just someone, I don't know, again, don't know him, like trend jacking off of the popular Lemkin posts on NPS or whatever, CX at the beginning of the year, where that got a lot of traction, where Jason,
but that was a good one, right?
I actually felt like that one was coming from a standpoint of like trying to help everyone out, where this one was just complaining and whining about a sales.
Sam, what are your thoughts on this? What do you think this says about our community and where we are in this journey? That was I didn't want to highlight this just to beat up Mark. It was more so a commentary on our community. So what do you think this says? Or general thoughts?
No, general thoughts. Well, Willie just got a haircut and he looks great, and he hadn't had a bath in a while.
I heard him barking in the background a little bit.
That was Ozzy. Ozzy is so annoying. I've got 3 dogs here: Abe, Ozzy, and Willie. So that's one thing. General thought. Yeah, Abe's the new one.
Abe's
he's the new one. Yeah, he's an idiot. He's supposed to be 10 years old, but he runs around like he's a puppy and just a total jackass in the most adorable way.
I want that type of energy when I'm 80.
Yeah, I know. He like runs down the hall, then runs back and bumps into the wall accidentally. So anyway, that's one general thought. Second general thought is...
Sorry, what are your specific thoughts about this?
No, I agree with what you guys are saying. I thought it was really interesting because in our group text, that was AJ's first comment, was this AE is just trying to prevent churn. Yeah. And I thought, and as you're talking about the difference between sales and go-to-market, I think this is another reason why people are frustrated with subscriptions, because, you're sort of, you're closing the deal as quickly as you can, locking them into some kind of auto renewal or 12-month agreement, calling it recurring revenue. You didn't really listen. Yeah. You weren't really focused on making sure that it was a good customer, one that was lined up to succeed. And the consequence, I'm just thinking, again, it's the same thing I was just talking about as it relates to Omakase. If somebody showed up on our doorstep and said, this is what I'm going to use it for, I know what it does, I know what Pavilion does, you don't need to tell me. That's not true. That they do need to be onboarded.
You're so right, Sam. Like the point you just made.
Which part about how Willie
the Pavilion thing? So you and I got to know each other in 2017 or 18. Pavilion Revenue Collective had 200 members, and we knew each other. We had a relationship. And when I actually became involved, I went into this call with Brian thinking that I know Pavilion better than you, dude. Like, I knew Pavilion when it wasn't even like 1,000 members. Like, I got this. And in that call, I remember thinking, I was like, I had no idea. Like, I didn't know any of this stuff. And I was a partner and I introduced hundreds of people to it. I just didn't know the complete breadth of what you guys had built. And I was close to the firm.
Yeah. So I agree.
So how do we move past this siloed thinking? Like, what has to happen? How long does this take for a community? What are your thoughts there?
I mean, again, it's like all of these things are interconnected because all of these things are connected to the growth rate expectations. They're connected to what the valuation of the company is. Mark's only been in organizations that had raised tons of money, that had, massive expectations to grow, needed every single sale, needed it to be closed, where every point of emphasis was on new ARR, and then all of the blame was shifted to customer success and why that wasn't working when, net revenue or gross revenue retention wasn't working out. So what needs to happen? It's happening, right? Capital's drying up. Lemkin says most B2B SaaS businesses aren't even fundable right now, right? So what needs to happen is there needs to be an emphasis on profitable, efficient growth. And the only way to drive profitable, efficient growth is to line up the experience from pre-sale to post-sale, right? And view the whole thing with mutual action plans, which was always, one of the key insights from building a mutual action plan with a customer as you go through the buying process, is that signing the contract is your milestone. It's not their milestone. Their milestone is the outcome that you're trying to deliver. Their milestone is the solution, is the relief of the pain that they're seeking out your solution for. So all of that means that we need to, as Kyle says, right? Slow is smooth and smooth is fast. I mean, he's not the only one that says that. Lots of people say that.
That's a jiu-jitsu
But the point
saying.
is, like, there needs to be a reasonable growth rate so that you don't feel this inordinate pressure. I think the sales leaders and the marketing, this is the same thing I've said for the Bill of Rights for Pavilion the whole time, which is that I think every executive should be compensated the same. I don't think, a chief revenue officer should get quarterly commissions if the person that owns the renewals or net revenue retention isn't also getting quarterly commissions. And ideally, they'd all get paid an annual bonus based on the company achieving its NRR target, its ARR target, and probably its EBITDA target too. So all of that is, and that's why driving alignment is so important, because the buyer journey starts before the sale and ends well after the sale. The sale is the midpoint of the experience. Sometimes, it's only the first. If you're going to have a customer for 5 years, you're going to have 4 renewals and 1 sale. So it's probably more important, if you really want to line up those 4 other sales, which are all renewals, that you align the expectations with what you can deliver.
That was a really interesting point that David Obran made, right? How they are involving customer success in the buying process, and it creates a lot more alignment around what we're promising the customer, and everybody is kind of aligned on, yes, let's promise this, and then let's go and deliver this together. I found that involvement really interesting. I'm sure others are doing it. I hadn't heard of anyone else doing that. AJ, what do you think about this?
It sounds like we should have Mark on and he should defend himself. And we
sure.
I think that's probably true.
And then he gets, but he doesn't get a full episode. He gets like 10 minutes. And so
you come in for like a 15-minute debate.
And then we show you the door.
And then we'll write a big long LinkedIn post about what an idiot he is.
Yeah, and after he leaves, we'll just talk about that one. That's on the answer.
I think it's fair. People should have a chance to defend themselves. We'll call him. We'll also call this unknown AE. Everyone can hash
Let's
it
get
out.
them in a room and have a buying simulation.
AJ,
I do hear what Mark's saying, just in his defense. It is frustrating when you feel like people aren't listening to you. So that's the other side of the argument, which is that you feel like you're talking to a wall, and this person was trained to do discovery, and all they're really doing is asking annoying questions.
Some questions
are
like, pull up your CRM, I'll just answer them for you. Like, what else do you not have in the MedPIC bank qualification for me? I get that.
Yeah, but like, you're a sales leader, relax. Like, you're one of the thought leaders, you're one of the gangsters of the space. Like, maybe use it as a teaching moment versus going and bashing this person on LinkedIn. Like, it seems like a early stage career AE that just got bashed with 1 million impressions on a post. I think the AE deserves a little bit of support here from us as well. Okay, so AJ, one of the challenges right now seems to be that with startups, specifically seed and Series A companies, I've now spoken to a couple of sales leaders as well as founders who are thinking, I see the data. People want to consolidate. They don't want to buy more tech. And if they're buying something, they're buying these larger, more comprehensive platforms. Great. What do? Mine's a point solution. Like I had raised $1 million. What am I going to build? Like a full end-to-end platform? I have a point solution. How do I win in this market? Like, is it like it feels overwhelming. The flip side is you're not looking for 100 million in revenue. You need to go scratch out 1 million, maybe, right? That seems like a very solvable problem, but maybe I'm wrong. Like, what do you think?
No, you're not wrong at all. It's really hard. It's really hard out there. Look at us. We have all of our businesses are fairly mature in terms of like thinking and evolve. And we're sitting here talking about these very problems every single week of how's our customer evolved? How do we win? How does our customer win? That's what ultimately we're saying. Like, how does our customer win? And then that allows us to unlock. And in this world where you're sitting like, hey, I have raised $1 million. This is a situation where I don't know if this is going to be viable because there aren't CFOs, there aren't people like people saying they're paying for it. I'm having to give it away. I have 30 customers, 20 customers that are just like using the thing to get feedback from. And then I need to go raise a seed series A. I don't have a great answer outside of like, I think we go back to some of the themes and what we've talked about previously with partnerships.
What if you were starting a business today and you knew I'm raising $1 million? I'm not going to throw all my wealth at it. I'm just going to raise $1 million and do it the way that it's supposed to be done. Okay. So now, do you have any fear that you can't find $1 million in revenue in this market, like with a point solution?
No, not at all. But I think this is a really interesting point, and it's a little bit of maybe a left turn in this conversation. But there are a lot of former founders that are out there that are like talking and having these discussions on Signal, on Discord about businesses that were originally these major service businesses, and they are taking AI, they're taking Gen AI, they're taking pieces of it, and they're automating it to bankroll it and get $1 million or $2 million in cash flow, doing a lot of different things. I had a really interesting conversation with my brother, a VP of product at a startup, and he's thinking about doing that on the side himself. So my answer is I wouldn't start a software business today. That's like the contrarian point of view. Yeah. I wouldn't start a software business today.
Well, that's a big statement.
That's a big statement. And the reason for that is like, I think that there's just too much for the world to figure out what software looks like. I think Sam's right. Subscription services and subscription models are challenging. We should look to other business models. I think building the software is changed, and what a good engineer, what a good CX, what a good sales rep looks like has changed so much. And I don't have those answers where experience has told me exactly what it looks like. Now, I have it for my business from a maturity standpoint. I feel good about our position and where we are. But as a brand new founder coming into, or not brand new founder, third time founder coming into this, I don't think I would start a software business.
That's very interesting. I don't know. I think that's just
you seem shocked at that. Like, why is that surprising?
Yeah, I'm a little bit speechless. Sam, you say something. Let me think about this.
Look at the data. What are we just talking about? We're talking about interest rates. We're talking about interest rates not being cut. We're talking about capital markets not returning. We're talking about Gen AI changing over the world, what that looks like. We're talking about you no longer have office space.
This is me, like, I'm trying to put myself in your shoes and think there's probably a flaw in me that I don't think these type of challenges are not navigatable. Like, I think they are, and they create as many opportunities as they do disturbances. And so I think, is there the potential to build a really interesting business that is a software business with all of this taken into account? 100%.
Of course.
And so if it's possible, then am I able to do it?
Yeah, sure. Part of it is just like problems to solve. I haven't really thought about it. And so like that's I get excited about ideas and then I grasp onto it. I guarantee there are founders that are listening to this right now that are nodding their head yes. They would not start a business today's world.
Sure, because they're dealing with the after effects of a 12 months of being beaten up by an economy,
but it
right?
Like
it's really hard. 2023 was really hard. Like everybody got punched in the face, dud, and everywhere else. And it goes back to what Sam was saying, is that when you come out of a market like that, your thinking even shrinks. The aperture becomes more narrow in terms of your vision and what you're saying to people. You're on the back foot because the market's been beating you up. And so then you think starting a new business, yeah, like of course you're in a negative mind frame over that. But if you look at the opposite of that, in 2021, everybody thought building a business is easy. And the truth is somewhere in between. It's not easy, but it's also not impossible. And yes, markets impact it, but a lot of these challenges are very logical problems to be solved. And it's usually our emotions that cloud our judgment. Like Sam was saying, that there's so many founders who don't understand why my technology is not flying off the shelves. It's the same way as to why a parent doesn't think their child's ugly, so right? Like it's really, really hard.
Was it Mark Andreessen or was Horowitz, whatever? He said like the time to build Black Swan memo that came out during COVID. You all remember that?
Yes. Yeah.
I think that was the right message, wrong timing. I actually would say that like it's not time to build just yet, but we were probably on the precipice of what that looks like. And so like, look, in 6 months, 12 months, if you were to ask me that same question, I'm like, oh my goodness, I'm telling everyone to go out and build everything they possibly can. Maybe. Today, I'm not giving that feedback. So I don't know.
I mean, AJ, I'm not hearing you say don't start a business. You're saying don't start a software business.
Right.
And I think I think that's the what I'm reading and hearing and thinking about is the margin profile of services businesses is different because of offshore, because of automation, and because of AI.
Yep.
And there's a lot of businesses that did not look like interesting businesses to start that have become or are becoming interesting businesses.
For sure.
And the capital intensity of a software business relative to a services business that uses off-the-shelf technology and automates a lot of workflows that used to require humans and thus was low margin and moves it to a high margin business, those are more attractive opportunities from a zero starting point than having to go raise, because the real point is, if B2B tech is in this period where multiples are really 6 times ARR, 7 times ARR, the venture profile of B2B SaaS is very different than it would have been, than it was a couple of years ago. Again, not exclusively due to interest rates, but partially. So the returns that you might get to outlay that capital, you still, for me, I agree with AJ, but I'm also non-technical. I haven't started. I tried to build a software. I tried to turn Pavilion into a software business for a little while, and that was a disaster. So I'm focused on services businesses where I can use automation, I can use offshore teams, I can use teams that are great at AI, because that's the other thing that you can use. You can start, I'm sure there's going to be AI agencies, if they're not already, that they know how to use AI, even if you don't, to automate a bunch of workflows. And then you just have, you're the sales and marketing engine to a specific industry target or specific ICP. You're like, we do this for that. I was talking to somebody last night. I had dinner with a member of CEO Pavilion that was talking about acquiring and rolling up a bunch of CPA firms.
Yep.
And then just turning them into operations consulting firms that provide out of the box business startup in a box services, including accounting services and all finance, sort of like outsourced CFO, but everything from legal to tax to compliance, and using, cheaper labor, automation, and the aggregation of all of these resources to make a CPA business much more interesting than it was 10 years ago.
Thank goodness Sam is here. Thank goodness Sam is here to clean up my messes. He's able to.
I think like the CPA idea is interesting, but even simpler, like the one thing that we all have is a CRM probably, but also bookkeeper. And it's really simple work. And you can combining outsourcing and AI, create such an interesting bookkeeping business with a huge TAM that gets to really high levels of profitability. I would love to invest in that business. Sam, as you were talking, what seems to be happening is that the margin profile is evolving. They're both kind of getting to a similar spot, right? Because you've got gross margins of a software business are coming down because of AI, which is a cost of goods sold if it's within your product, and of services is increasing because of automation and AI. So they're kind of getting to a similar spot. One has much higher barriers to entry, and barriers to scale than the other. So it's interesting. It's interesting how this plays out. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, again, for me, the capital intensity of a software business, if I don't know how to code myself,
Yes.
if AJ was a best-in-class 10x engineer, I think it would be great for him to start a software company because he could use Copilot and he could use AI services to augment himself, and he would call his 3 or 4 top engineering buddies, and that would be great. But for a non-technical founder, the path to building an interesting business is very different than it used to be. The reason that you had to start a software business, because that's the only kind of business that was of any interest, and every other kind of business was going to wear down the soles on your shoes as you pounded the pavement looking for customers every year. But if you can build some kind of recurring services business that's interesting, that has technology inside of it, but isn't necessarily a software business, the opportunity for non-technical founders is much broader and much more appealing than it was, 5 years ago, 10 years ago.
Then all you have to do is capture the demand that Asad was talking about at the beginning of this, and we go full circle into this episode.
AJ, as a technical founder, as a non-technical founder, how technical do you have to be a good CEO of a tech company?
You have to, what I would say to that is you have to really understand the work. You have to truly understand the day-to-day of an engineer. And so I've done a bunch of these different things over the years. One of the things I did is I literally sat down with our first engineer at Trendkite, Lindsay DeFalco. She's the VP of product at Crossbeam today. She was our first engineer at Trendkite, employee number 1. And I said, I just want to watch you code. Like literally just watch. I think would make jokes that developing and coding was just copying and pasting things to fix things. And she gets so annoyed about that. So I just would sit down and watch her. And funny enough, like the first thing she did was copy and paste something or look something up on Google. But that like really led to me to like just truly understand the work. And then the work evolves, right? Your code base evolves, your technology evolves, your product, your scoping, your design, how you think about the world evolves. And as a CEO, you absolutely need to understand those pieces. You don't need to micromanage. Can't micromanage as a non-technical CTO or co-founder. You don't put engineers on quotas. You have to think about engineering as a team sport, and really understand how those pieces of the team sport work and play with each other. So we talked about it. We're coming up on the end of the episode, guys. We've got wins of the week and shout outs to go though.
Shout outs, wins of the old week.
Wins of the week.
Who's going?
Oh, me? Okay. I want to give a sweet shout out to my beautiful daughters. Avery, Evie, and Nora. Unfortunately, over the weekend, the Bruno family lost their 15-year-old cat, Gracie. And Gracie was beloved by our family, and the girls took it pretty hard on Saturday night when we put her down, but they've rebounded. And it is so cool as a parent. This is something that just is so much fun to watch the resiliency of your kids and how they react to challenging situations and how they learn and grow. And each one of them took it a different way. Avery, our oldest, just wanted to be left alone, took it pretty hard. Evie had much more of like she's eating all the hard food she wants in kitty heaven now. And Nora has somewhere in between. So it's just great to see that. So shout outs to my beautiful daughters who are growing up to be such awesome, amazing young women. Aww. And I mean, I guess I'm giving a shout out really to my wife for this, but they're just awesome cool kids, and they crushed it. And don't worry, my wife is currently cat shopping for 2 new cats, ragdoll. So if anyone out there knows any ragdoll breeders, please let us know.
That's so sweet. Okay, I'll go next. Mine is Brian from the Pavilion team. He's just so helpful. Insight had reached out. They needed Brian Lee. Insight needed a recruitment partner in Japan, and they asked me. I was like, I don't know. And so I just messaged Brian. I was like, hey, do you have a path to figuring this out? And in 2 days, I was connected with 5 people who in turn connected me with 6 different agencies who I then connected with inside. And he just does this each and every time I asked him a question. He's so quick to solve the problem. And he genuinely seems to be a person who likes to help. Like, there are people that when you ask them a question, you know you annoyed them. And some people who that's their zone of genius, solving problems for other people. And so I really appreciate his help. And so shout out to Brian.
Brian's a great guy.
Brian's a great guy.
You're listening to this on Sunday, dear listener, but we're recording it before then. And last Thursday, in your time, we had our sold out CMO summit. And I just want to give a shout out to Susan Berg, Maddie Helwig, Alex Adkins, and the entire team at Pavilion that's putting on these events. This is year 2 of our functional summits, and they are just getting better and better and better. And it's really, really cool. And we're doing cool stuff where we're planning our events together with partners. So Anthony Kennedy is doing a CMO conference called Golden Hour this week, also in New York and Brooklyn. And that's the day before, so that marketers can come to New York and kill 2 birds with 1 stone and attend Golden Hour and then attend CMO Summit. And it's really cool to see us build a really powerful and compelling events business and get better and better and better at it every single time we do it. And so Susan Berg, Maddie Helwig, Kathleen Booth, Josh Carter, Marshawn, I forget who else. I'm probably forget. Jeremy Chaplin, I'm sure, has done a lot of work on it. But anyway, I'm really excited. It's going to be an amazing event. CRO Summit's going to be amazing. Then we're going over to London for GTM EMEA, and then Austin, Texas for GTM 2024. And we just got Roberge to do a fireside for us in Boston at CRO Summit on June 6th.
Oh,
so
nice.
If you can't make it to CMO
Sam,
Summit,
you have such an interesting job. Your job is very interesting. Like, Pavilion has these like almost different businesses within it that are all really fascinating businesses. Like, you've got this media company you're building, you've got this events business, you've got this online community
called Omakase.
Yeah, it's really interesting. It must be fascinating to run it.
I think if I can lower my personal overhead, I'll be very, very happy, and I'll be happy to run this thing forever.
It's the middle number that's a problem.
There he is.
All right, folks. Well, thanks for listening. Listen to us this Thursday for Topline Hotline, and give us 5 stars, and join our Slack channel. Join our Slack.
By the way, the live event was awesome. We didn't say anything about the Topline Hotline.
It was awesome.
Yeah, that was great. Colin killed it.
We're going to do more of those. Yeah. It was great. Yeah. All right.
And the Slack channel is now like, if you're not in it, that's weird. Like, this Slack channel is brilliant.
And it's cool because it's the one place where it's like market commentary. That's what I like about the Slack channel, as opposed to like other Slack communities where it's just asking for stuff. This is like what's happening in the world and how should we interpret it, and that's what's happening in the Topline Slack channel. And it's the smartest place on the internet for go-to-market.
It really is.
Talk to you later. Bye. And that's a wrap for today's episode, brought to you by SalesLoft. SalesLoft helps revenue teams take the right actions to close every deal with the only platform built around the seller's day. Visit salesloft.com to learn how the world's top revenue teams hit their number by using SalesLoft. Thanks for listening to Topline. New episodes come out every Sunday. If you like what you heard today, subscribe so you never miss an episode, leave a 5-star review, and share it with your friends. Don't forget to join our Topline Slack channel to connect with us and discuss the topics we cover with other listeners. Click the link in the show notes. Lastly, if you're interested in joining Pavilion, you can learn more about membership at joinpavilion.com/membership. Thanks again for listening.